Persona is a series that I played earlier this year, and it quickly became my favorite video game series of all time. So today, I'm going to talk about every game I've played from the series. I'm going to both review them and talk about my experience with it. The games that I'll be talking about today are the following: Persona 3, Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight, Persona 4 Golden, Persona 4 Arena, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, Persona 4 Dancing All Night, Persona 5 Royal, Persona 5 Strikers, and lastly, we'll talk about both Persona 5 Tactica and Persona 3 Reload. So go grab some popcorn and a drink and kick back as I, the king of the Hedgies, Monkey D. Hedgie, take you to our first destination, that being Tatsumi Port Island.
When stars light up blue, when I look in your eyes, the wider that's my soul flows, can't help thinking of you. Love reaches out if you hold me.
So before I get into this video is going to be very spoiler heavy, so if you haven't played these games, or you currently are and don't want spoilers, thank you for coming, but Persona 3 is the first massive hit from the company Atlus, in the Persona series at least. It was released for the PS2 originally, with an updated version a few years later, and a portable version a few years after that. The game features a boy named Makoto Yuki. He's technically nameless, but the dancing spin-off in the movies call him by Makoto Yuki. Now that's just what I call him anyway. So Makoto arrives as a transfer student at Tatsumi Port Island. As he is heading to the dorms, the station goes black and the sky becomes a greenish color. This is known as the Dark Hour, but more on that later. He arrives at the dorms and a boy named Pharos appears and lets Makoto know about his journey ahead. He'll continue to do this through the course of the game. The girl appears frightened and asks Makoto what he's doing there or how he's even moving. This is Yukari Takeba, Makoto's classmate. Soon another girl comes in the room and explains the situation. This is Mitsuru Kirijo, one of Makoto's upperclassmen. Mitsuru explains the situation to Makoto, and Makoto heads to bed. The next day he heads to school with Yukari on the monorail. The school is none other than Gyokukan High School. Makoto heads to the faculty office and we're told both of his parents are dead. While in class he meets another friend, that being Junpei Iori. Makoto and Junpei become friends. Makoto heads back to the dorm and repeats the cycle for day 2. On his third day in the city, the dorms are attacked by monstrous beings called Shadows. Another one of Makoto's upperclassmen named Akihiko Sanada and the chairman Shuji Ikutsuki warn Yukari to wake Makoto up and get him out. On the roof of the dorms, Makoto and Yukari are trapped, basically cornered by a giant shadow. Yukari draws a gun, puts it to her skull, ready to pull the trigger. I say ready, she's visibly shaking and freaking out, which causes the shadow to knock her to the ground. Makoto picks up the gun and puts it to his head. We then travel to the Velvet Room, as we're greeted by Igor and his attendant Elizabeth. He explains what power he is about to awaken, and as we travel back, Makoto pulls the trigger. Since this isn't actually a gun, it's an evoker, he doesn't blow his brains out. Instead, he summons his persona, this one being known as Orpheus. Using his persona, he defeats the shadow, saving Yukari in the process. He then falls to the ground and meets in a hospital for the week. Thus ends the first full moon of Persona 3. We awaken to Yukari, and she tells him that she also lost her dad in an explosion. The next day, as the two head home to the dorms, Junpei moves in, and mostly because he has a persona as well. Makoto and Junpei officially join the Specialized Extracurricular Execution Squad, or SEES for short. Mitsuru takes the three to Gekkoukan at night. When the dark hour, a mysterious 25th hour hidden at midnight, switches over, the school turns into a massive tower known as Tartarus. The team ventures in, and Makoto, Yukari, and Junpei get some combat practice with shadows. From here on out, the game's events take place on days of the full moon. I'll talk about all the time in between a bit later on. The next full moon is the trio's first mission, on the monorail. A shadow has hijacked the vehicle, and the trio need to dispose of it. Junpei, being the reckless dumbass he is, decides to go after a shadow by himself. The two have to catch up and save Junpei. After they do that, though, the train starts to move. The trio rush to the front of the car and defeat the first of 12 Shadow Arcana. Makoto then stops the train, and the trio succeed in their first mission, which ends the events of the first full moon. Before the next moon, rumors go around that a girl named Fuka Yamagishi is dead. We learn about Fuka Yamagishi after Akihiko told Seize that he found her and wants to recruit her. The trio, after a week of figuring stuff out, head to a back alley to find clues. They are harassed by street punks, but are saved by their soon-to-be ally Shinjiro Aragaki. The trio leave and continue their search for Fuka. They later learn that Fuka's douchebag of a friend locked her in a gym overnight, because that's what friends do. The trio figure out that she's probably been stuck in Tartarus due to the dark hour. Seize creates a plan to rescue her. The team become out of contact with Mitsuru and are lost pretty much as soon as they get there. Makoto meets up with Junpei and Akihiko, where they also meet the missing Fuka. She hasn't been harmed because of her persona's ability. They rescue her and they defeat their next Shadow Arcana. Fuka is recruited as their sort of navigator, and she's a great addition to the team. The next full moon, the team are located at a love hotel, and after defeating one of the Shadow Arcana, something happens and the team gets separated. After a very uncomfortably long amount of time hearing a minor, or in the movie's case, watching a minor take a shower, the attempted temptation by the Shadow Arcana stops, and Makoto and Yukari both meet up with the others to take down their last shadow of the night. As they're leaving, we are introduced to our persona-powered villain group Strega, composed of Takaya, Jin, and the only interesting character of the three, Chidori. I'll focus on them a bit later. Soon, during the summer, the group takes a trip to Yakushima, and after some time of goofing around, they're explaining the truth of everything. The truth being that Yukari's dad totally and 100% caused the dark hour. Definitely not a lie here. Yukari gets understandably upset at Mitsuru and Akihiko for just not even fucking telling her anything, and leaves. Makoto goes after her, and they share a very sweet character moment together. The next day, the group is introduced to the last anti-shadow weapon, Aegis. She joins their team and is one of the best members, by the way. And they enjoy the rest of their vacation at Yakushima, and they leave. Later on, we are introduced to two characters, Koromaru, the goodest boy ever, and Ken Amada. While Ken has the personality of cardboard, he's also an important part of the story, kinda. His mom was killed 2 years ago, is in a constant state of depression. We find out at some point that Shinjiro is taking some kind of persona suppressant pills that he's getting from Strega. Strega is upset after finding out that Seize wants to end the Dark Hour. This quite literally is Takaya and Jin's only personality trait and motivation. I'll talk about Chidori when we get to Junpei's persona resolution. I just don't have much to say on Strega. Spoiler alert, Shinji is the one who killed Ken's mom by accident. Oops. Anyway, their next full moon happens. Strega confronts Seize for the first time, and after their weak character dialogue, traps the actual good characters in the area that they were going to fight the Shadow Arcana at. They of course defeat the Arcanas, and the problem is resolved. When the next full moon comes around, and Junpei is kidnapped by Chidori after he reveals he's part of the group tour, again I'll go into detail later, the group defeats the Shadow, and then they confront Chidori on the roof and defeat her, which lands Chidori in the hospital. Eventually, her persona begins to hurt her. Shinji rushes in to give her the persona Begone pills, but Akihiko notices and confronts about it later. Ken overhears that Shinji caused the accident and vows to get revenge. The next full moon, October 5th, Ken and Shinjiro are nowhere to be found. After the next two shadows are defeated, the group finds out that Ken and Shinji are in an alley. Ken has an emotionally raged moment, and Shinji is prepared to be killed by Ken. Shinji warns him of Ken's fate if he kills him, that he will become like Shinjiro. Suddenly, Takaya appears and explains that Shinji is going to die regardless because of the pills. And then, Shinjiro Aragaki dies. The group is understandably shaken by the sudden death of their teammate. Ken is gone and doesn't come home until a talk with Akihiko. Akihiko is not at Shinji's funeral. However, he comes when no one is around. He has a very heartbreaking scene where he breaks down. From here, Akihiko and Ken's personas awaken. Fuka's will also awaken after finding out her douche of a friend is transferring. She vows to do more for her team from then on. Soon, the final full moon approaches. They fight Strega as Strega spouts some dumb bullshit that passes his character motivation, and they move on to fight the final shadow. Once doing so, they go back to the dorms and celebrate. The next day, the Dark Hour still occurs, however. Aigis is also nowhere to be found. So Seize heads to Tartarus, and they're confronted by the twist villain Shuji Ikutsuki. Aigis is also not on their side, because she's a robot. The chairman reveals that they actually defeated all the shadows, which will lead to the fall, or in other words, the end of the world. Turns out Yukari's dad was innocent, and Shuji is the one at fault. Mitsuru's father, who was also there, was shot and killed while also wounding Shuji. Aigis, after some struggling, turns her back to Shuji and frees Seize. Shuji falls to his death after laughing like a crazy person, and the night ends. Later in the month, we are introduced to Ryoji Mochizuki, who Aigis feels immediately threatened by. A week or two later, Chidori is rescued from her hospital by the members of Strega, who are unfortunately still alive. Junpei confronts Chidori during the Dark Hour. So, Junpei met Chidori months ago in the story, and has visited and talked to her on numerous occasions, which is what led to him being kidnapped the first time. When she was in the hospital, he would visit her constantly, and thus she became attached and now is afraid of death. After a fight with Chidori, Takaya shoots Junpei from off-screen. After Chidori revives him, she loses her life and her persona merges with Junpei's. This moment is absolutely fantastic and is one of the most emotional moments in the game. I'll talk about the voice cast and performances later on, but this scene is so good. On a trip to Kyoto, Mitsuru and Yukari have a heart-to-heart, and Mitsuru's persona awakens. Yukari also awakens around a similar time after watching a very emotional video from her father before he died. When the next full moon happens, Aigis is gone again. Aigis was at the bridge confronting Ryoji, who is revealed to us to be the appraiser of death. His existence, as he explains, is confirmation that the world will end. He meets with the team and explains that they have 1 month to choose an option. Either to kill Ryoji and all memories of the Dark Hour will be gone, or attempt to face death, or Nyx in this case. The month passes on while the main cast is in a constant state of fear. They ultimately decide to spare Ryoji and fight Nyx. Aegis was opposed to this at first, but after Persona Awakening is now on their side. They're given the date for the promised day, that being January 31st. The month passes, and on the 31st, the group scales to the top of Tartarus. While they beat Strega to irrelevancy, thank fuck, Nyx comes down to Tartarus and the final battle begins. After you deplete the last of its 14 goddamn health bars, and that's if you don't encounter the Moonless Gone glitch in Portable. Fuck all of that. Anyway, Nyx merges with the moon, and as the moon comes down on Earth, we are taken back to the Velvet Room. Igor gives us one last power, and we travel back and take on Nyx for the last time. After you seal Nyx, your friends look for you in the space they are trapped in. Ryoji's disembodied voice explains that he's okay. Makoto and Seize reunite, and the date moves to March 5th, the final day of the game. Aegis comes to your door. Everyone has forgotten everything at this point. Makoto has been extremely tired the last couple months. She brings him to the roof of the school, which is where everyone agreed to meet after defeating Nyx. After the group remembers this, they head to the roof. Aegis and Makoto have one last heartfelt conversation. The others arrive, and Makoto sees them one last time. He then closes his eyes, and at this time, our protagonist, Makoto Yuki, dies. And thus, the end of Persona 3. Now that we've got the lengthy summary out of the way, let's finally talk about the damn game. So Persona 3 is a JRPG/social simulator. During the day, you'll go to school and live a student life. You'll level up your social stats, which are very important, or initiate in this game's character stories, or social links, if you will. Each social link has 10 ranks, and are just stories that build each character. Most are pretty decent, but my favorite has to be Akinari. If you know, you know. It's kinda heartbreaking. The downside is if you want to complete a female social link, you'll have to begin an intimate relationship with them. Whether you want to or not, you do not have a choice. Thankfully, this was changed in 4 and 5. At night, you'll journey through Tartarus, 254 floors, and grind to level up your character or their personas. You have the ability to wield and fuse personas, as you are the wild card. These can give you advantage over enemies in battle, and just help you get better at combat and bosses in general. Now I'd like to talk about the voice cast for a second, because it's fantastic. Makoto Yuki, and also Pharos and Ryoji, is voiced by the legend that is Yuri Lowenthal. I don't have to mention how good of a performance it is if it's Yuri Lowenthal. I just don't. Michelle Ruff is great as Yukari. I really can't picture someone else. I really probably shouldn't draw attention to this guy. Vic Mignogna as Junpei, sadly, is one of the best performances in the game. Shame about everything else. Tara Platt and Liam O'Brien as Mitsuru and Akihiko fit the older sibling-like characters perfectly. Karen Strassman fits Aegis really well. I'm also not going to talk about her much either for reasons. Grant George is Shinjiro. I really can't wait to see Justice Scullum. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right, because I want to see that take. Fuka and Ken's voice actors are fine. They're definitely the weakest performances, and they didn't really grow on me at all. Laura Bailey voices Katone Shiomi, or Femc, as dubbed by the fans. Oh shit, yeah, Femc. Okay, so in Persona 3 Portable, you have the option to choose between a female or male main character. The gameplay isn't really different, but the character writing and interactions are different. She also has her own music, which goes hard as fuck. The music in this game in general is phenomenal. The music you've been hearing so far is all music from the soundtrack, and it's godlike. So now that I've talked about everything I want to, I'm gonna discuss my thoughts on this game. I fucking love Persona 3. 3 has made me cry on numerous occasions, and kind of made me feel empty by the end, but it was worth it and painful at the same time. Makoto Yuki is my favorite character in all of Persona. His death at the end of this game absolutely broke me in more ways than I can explain. Really, it's a game I highly recommend to anyone. So now that we've finished with Persona 3, and instead of moving on to Dancing on Moonlight, which I'm going to talk about when we get to 5's dancing game, for now, it's time to head to the country town of Inaba, and the home of my favorite Persona game of all time, Persona 4 Golden.